Hello, survivors. I feel like I should apologize for my appearance right now. It is 2:30 in the morning, and I've had a long day, but I just have this second wind and feel like talking to you all. So, what I want you to know is that my goal for this channel is not to spend a lot of time bashing the narcissist. There is so much information on the internet about the characteristics of the cluster B. And if you are here, I'm sure that you have or you will soon be doing a lot of research on things like triangulation and gaslighting, and love bombing, and all of those things will come up in my story, but I don't want to spend the majority of our time talking about the narcissist, because at the end of the day, we can't change the narcissist, and we don't really want to spend our time with them anyways. We want to be free of them. We want to be free of them, and I hope you get to a point where, to be frank, you don't really care at all about the narcissist. So I want to be clear that I am going to talk about some of the things that the narcissist will do, because I know that if you are in the beginning of your healing journey, you need that validation. And I know that I went a long time where I would come home from work and I would be watching a YouTube video, and I could tell you certain people that I used to watch just because I needed that validation to see that it wasn't me, that I wasn't crazy, that this is exactly what happened. What I thought was happening, that people around me didn't seem to understand or weren't validating at all, it actually was happening. And I felt like I was dropped down the rabbit hole. So to come home and to get on YouTube, or to be in my car listening to some channel that I had subscribed to, was a lifesaver. I mean, it was sanity saver for me. And I know that there were even times where I would seem to be doing a lot better, and all of a sudden I would just have a rough day, and I would get a little ding on my phone because a channel that I had subscribed to, there was a video posted, and just that video was the validation I needed about triangulation, or about, the importance of communicating and writing if you're trying to co-parent, which is not going to happen, with these people. And so I do want to give you some sense of validation, and we will talk about the things that a narcissist does, but I don't want to come across as angry or pissed off or anything, because truly, honestly, these people they're sick, they're pathetic, they're sad, they don't do anything good. They don't add any value to this world. So we don't need to be giving them a whole lot of time. So I want to just kind of put that out there at the beginning. I also want to talk to you about me and a little bit about my experience. So when I was recovering from narcissistic abuse, one of the first things I did was I bought the book Psychopath Free by Jackson Mackenzie. And if you're on these sites for very long, you're going to hear about that book. I suggest that if you even suspect that you're in a relationship with a psychopath or a sociopath or a narcissist, and you might not know those terms, if you just think that you're in an emotionally abusive relationship, if you are with someone whose behavior you cannot explain, that you've never met anyone like this before, you need to get the book Psychopath Free. When I read that book, it was my relationship, almost word for word. It was unbelievable. And I know that thousands of other people have said the exact same thing. Like, how did someone just write a book about my relationship? All of it, beginning, middle, end, all of it was like our relationship. So when I was reading that book, though, I remember there was a section in the book where Jackson Mackenzie, the author, said that when some people figure this stuff out and they heal and they end these toxic relationships, they don't want anything to do with narcissist again. They don't want to get involved in this online community and have anything to do with it. Other people start YouTube channels. I mean, there's a lot of really successful channels. I'm sure you're familiar with Thrive After Abuse with Dana, which is a great one. I also love Melanie Tanya Evans. I adore her. She was very helpful to me. There's so many YouTube channels out there. There's people putting books out on Amazon. Other people go that route, and they want to come back and help the survivors. And I didn't really know what route I would go. I think there was a time when I certainly would think about helping the survivors, but as I really started to heal myself, that's kind of a scary thought as well, because there is a part of you that just wants to move on and get past this. I mean, ugh, how much time did you waste with these people? Oh, God. I mean, they're terrible. They're terrible people. They're terrible. But, and, you know, there's also the fear of, could I be, you know, doing some damage here as I go back and talk about these things again? And do I have to access all that pain that I've worked so hard to put behind me? But I do think I have a kind of semi-unique perspective, because I basically figured this out right before I found out I was pregnant, and my pregnancy was just an absolute nightmare. Now, through my online connections, I have discovered this is pretty common to happen to women when they're pregnant. You know, so at first I wasn't seeing a lot of that. I was seeing people that were getting out of relationships with these people, and I understood trying to heal from that, but I just felt like these women were so lucky. You don't have a child with this person. And but I've learned over time that I'm not the only one, certainly. But I do think that there is a shortage of people out there with my experience overall, percentage-wise, in the community. So I wanted to talk about that. So I want to give you kind of a little background on kind of step one. This is like how I met the narcissist part one, or my life with the narcissist part one. So when I say that I'm starting my story with a narcissist, I'm going to start talking about the summer that I met the narcissist and how I got with the narcissist in a romantic sense. But when you've been involved with a person like this, it never really started with them. It started years ago, very likely in your childhood. There is a reason why you got involved with this person, and I firmly believe that. And people can be offended about that, but that is something I believe, and I want to be really honest that it is something that was true for me, that I have come to accept, and this is part of the healing. But I'm going to start out talking about the initial kind of encounter with the narcissist and the love bombing, and then I'm going to talk about the red flags that kind of give you a different perspective on the love bombing, the things that I was so quickly willing to overlook. Okay, so I met the narcissist in the summer of 2014, so just about 4 years ago. We had communicated online the fall before. We had been communicating through an online dating site, and I will go ahead and tell you that that site was Christian Mingle. We communicated kind of back and forth, but in the meantime, I had met someone else and really, really hit it off with this person and fell deeply, deeply in love. Not like the narcissistic love bombing, not that thing. This was a relationship that progressed rather slowly. We were really, really good friends. We had a lot of respect for each other and still do today. It was a good relationship. But this video is not about that relationship. That relationship did end, and sometimes when relationships are great and people love each other, they still end. And that doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. It hurt because I, of course, loved him. He also had a young daughter, and I was fond of her. It hurt, you know. And so the summer after he and I broke up, I did what people do when they're recovering from a breakup. I got in the best shape of my life. I was working out like crazy. I got my hair done. I was putting on makeup every day. I was, you know, I traveled out of state to see family for a while. All those things that you do when you're healing from a heartbreak. And then I also, as one of the things I'd read online, one of the things you should do when you're recovering from a breakup is to go out on a date with someone else. You know, just to say that you could, just to show that you're desirable, that you do have, that there is a future for you, that, you know, you will meet somebody else, and you just need that step of going out on a date. I remember reading that, and that's what I did. So I went out on a date with the same guy who I'd talked to earlier in that year on Christian Mingle. He was still sending me messages, and so I met him up for a date. The plan was just one date. The date was fine. It was dinner. He said he felt like he'd known me forever. It was fine. It was fine. The second date was we went on a hike, and on the second date, that is where I started to notice the red flags, and I'll come back to those later. But the second date was a hike. The third date was movies and then out to eat. And then the fourth date was dinner at his house. Okay, and I don't remember what all happened after that. I just remember the first four. I can say that the relationship progressed very quickly. This person was very quickly asking me to move in with him, and I declined because I have a home here that I actually pay for. I didn't rent. I bought this house. I am a teacher. I teach in the same area where I live, so I'm not going to switch districts and states. I certainly wasn't going to go across state lines. There's licensing issue, there's a pay cut, that kind of thing. I didn't really know this guy. I was starting to like him, but I didn't know him well enough to move in with him. I just thought that was kind of rash and silly. But the relationship progressed pretty quickly, and I would say our first date was end of July. Early in September, I went to the beach with three of my girlfriends, and I remember looking at rings down there because I thought we were going to get married. Now, this is insane. This is insane because when I first met this person, I was still very much in love with my ex. And if my ex would have come back or called me and said, hey, let's get another shot or whatever, I would have dropped the narcissist in a heartbeat. But it didn't take long for him to get in. And how did he get in? Well, he was a very good listener. He was very complimentary. We were becoming friends. He was also fun. His family owned a restaurant, so he had free tickets to orchestra, which I loved, to the orchestra, Broadway shows, which hit and miss, basketball, which I adore, baseball, not so much, but we were doing fun things, and I hadn't been doing fun things. My ex and I together, both were having some money problems and hadn't done so many fun things. So this guy came along, and he brought some fun into my life, okay? There was a period where the relationship really started to deepen, and I just thought he was amazing. I thought, this guy's amazing. And I remember thinking, how did I get so lucky? This is the most amazing man in the world. Imagine, I never even knew this was possible. I remember thinking all of those things. Now, it's interesting to say that, though, and this is how it's really kind of weird to describe the story, because the same man who was always buying me little gifts and being so thoughtful and taking me places and giving me back rubs and running my bath water and fixing me these wonderful meals, and if he thought I had a sore throat, he would make me pine needle tea. This same man who was so attentive to everything and I had so much fun with, during the first few months, he kept pressuring me to do things sexually I didn't want to do. He violated me a couple times sexually. He physically assaulted me one time, and I call it that now, but I wasn't willing to call it that then. There was an incident where we were kind of wrestling, playing around, just very little light, and it escalated, and he is holding me down, and he is hitting me repeatedly on my backside, and I am screaming for him to stop. And it was not a joke. We weren't laughing. I was really screaming, had tears in my eyes, and he was holding me and beating me like a child. And I looked at him. I remember looking at his face, and it was not the person that I knew. And when he finally stopped, and I was really hurting, I remember I was in shock. I didn't say anything. I was in shock. I had tears in my eyes. I got up. I just started putting clothes into the overnight bag that I had, and I left. I walked out the back door to get into my car, and as I'm walking out, I have to pass him, and he looks at me and he says, "You play too much." He was blaming me. Now, I left there, and I knew that wasn't my fault. I left there, I got in my car, and I thought, I was still in shock. What the hell just happened? And I knew that I was not ever going to see this guy again. Oh my God, this is insane. What the hell just happened? But then I got home, and a little while later, he texts, and then he calls, and he's acting like nothing happened. He didn't apologize, but he's acting like nothing happened. So then I started thinking, well, what did happen? Did he just think we were playing, and then things got a little out of control, and I let it go? and I went back into the relationship. Other red flags that I can talk about in hindsight. Second date. He's asking about going to my family reunion. He's asking me about my sex life. I actually felt fear. We got lost coming down off the mountain and actually felt fear on the second date. But yet I went on a third. The first time we were intimate, he got upset the morning after because I took the morning after pill. He got really upset with me, and he wanted me to leave it in God's hands. And I remember talking to my best friend, and I said, there's something wrong with this guy. This guy's mental. And she said, well, maybe he's just really immature, and, he might be 35 years old, but maybe he's not had a whole lot of relationships. There were some jealousy issues. There were some cyber stalking issues. There were concerns I had about the way he talked about his sisters. Concerns I had about the way he let his sisters do most of the work at the family restaurant. It became kind of our thing for him to say something and me to say, did you just make that up? And I can't even tell you what all this applied to, but I know that it was our thing, that he would say something and I would know it wasn't true. It didn't match with what he told me before. It didn't make sense. And I would say, did you just make that up? And yet somehow this guy, he was cute. He could be very charming. He was so thoughtful. In my mind, I just wrote it off as him being immature. He was immature. He was insecure. That kind of thing. He told me stories about his terrible childhood. He had a girlfriend who cheated on him before. And we'll get back to all this stuff later. But I was able to excuse a lot of things. But I can tell you that there was certainly a period in there, let's say months like 3, 4, 5, 6, where I didn't think about much of these kind of early violations at all. Because for the most part, things were good. But there were times throughout, even months 3, 4, 5, and 6, where things were happening that I can look at now and say, that's abuse. I have a picture of us about 7 months into our relationship on a hike. We are at the top of this beautiful mountain. It was a good day. I mean, it was quite a workout. And I had this picture for a while as the profile picture on my Facebook page. And everybody said it was such a great picture. We looked like such a wholesome couple out there backpacking. Well, that morning, he violated me sexually as soon as I woke up. And I remember crying and just crying because I had tried to tell him to stop doing this stuff before. And he really hurt me. And the excuse he gave me was he couldn't see what he was doing. That was the excuse he gave me. And I knew this was nonsense, guys. I knew it was nonsense, but we had plans to go on a hike. And so I cried. He held me. He apologized, which he hardly ever did. And then we got up and we did what we had planned to do. We went on a hike. And so people saw that picture, and they don't know that I had just been raped that morning. Only a couple people in my life knew that he'd held me down and beat me like a child. He had bruises, that I had bruises on my behind because of the way he beat me. But when these things happened, after, he was amazing again. The hike, he was wonderful. He had packed hot chocolate and everything, and I remember I would go somewhere and he was always offering it for me. He, on the hike, was picking pine needles because he was going to make me pine needle tea for my sore throat when we got home. I mean, this cycle of abuse that you've heard about, it's not just about physical abuse. And when I'm telling this story now, I know some of you are going to think, well, how was this the love bombing stage? How was this the good stage? But I promise you, it was really good to me. I love going to the basketball games. I love the back rubs. I love the constant compliments and the text messages and going out to eat and going to the movies and cooking dinner together and playing board games and taking jogs around the neighborhood together, going to church together, our dogs playing together. I thought he was, if not my best friend, then one of my best friends. And I thought that if the relationship didn't work out, we would certainly be friends. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. Even though I knew there were red flags, and I knew, okay, there's a chance this may not work out, even though I loved him passionately and wanted it to work out, I had no idea what I had gotten myself into.